pause that for me? Up. Great, thank you. All right. So let's check out screwball comedy. Just as war films, it has generic components to it that as a mode of understanding what characters and situations and story elements can happen. Same too with the screwball comedy. I made mention when we talked about the silent slapstick comedy and then the coming of sound, that slapstick comedy is going to die almost entirely with the coming of sound, that the visual antics of Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd do not translate into dialogue very well. That indeed Charlie Chaplin, who's going to make movies into the 1940s, is going to film his films silently and then post-sync sound. So we watched a clip from, what did we watch? Modern Times, and filmed in 1939 or 1940, and he's still filming in silent and then adding sound later. All the voice and all the other sound effects were all added after the filming. Well, that silent slapstick mode, that physical comedy, gets translated, as I started to suggest, into a verbal antics, to dialogue, creating that same sort of story. So if the physicality and the movement of cinema had to come to a screeching halt with the coming of sound, remember the technological problems that we had, created also then aesthetic limitations, that D.W. Griffith's massively moving camera with action happening in the fore, middle, and background, all of that came to a stop because of the introduction of sound, right? That indeed, that sound limited what film could actually do. So that silent slapstick mode, that anarchic, that visual madcap gets translated into this screwball comedy. What's going to often bring up, and the golden age of screwball comedies is definitely ends with, well, the golden age is the 1930s through World War, and just following World War II. But what's going to often bring up the comedy, as still happens in many of our comedies, is the antagonism between a particular pair, and it's precisely that antagonism, whether it is a couple in The First 50 Dates, is that the name of that Adam Sandler, they end up in Hawaii doing some, whatever, right, that vehicle, right, an antagonistic pair who then, through that antagonism, are going to produce all the comedy, and it ends up being a comedy of remarriage, in a way, right, that they end up, through that antagonism, in the very last moments of the movie, going to hook up and go, you know, despite all our differences, right? How many times has this movie's done that sort of thing, right? Have you ever been in a relationship like that, where you go, hey, despite that we pretty much have ripped each other to shreds for the past year, hating on each other, mockingly making comments and dissing each other, that we don't like to do any of the same sort of things, but I want to still be in a relationship with you? Does that happen in your life? It shouldn't happen in your life, right? Because that sounds like torture. Now, you could like that, but regardless, right, in terms of, that doesn't happen, that's not the way you want it to happen, but we applaud it, and we go and we watch hundreds of movies that do the same story. Well, that antagonism is often what gives rise to that comedy. So let's check out, we're going to watch another clip from His Girl Friday, another Howard Hawks movie, but today we're going to check out recording. With the coming of the silent, with the ending of the silent and the coming of the talkie era, I made the claim that one of the genres that's going to get significant attention if silent slapstick dies, obviously not only screwball comedy arise, but the gangster film as well through the late 1920s and into the 1930s is going to become a significant genre that's going to benefit from sound. Right, that the types of stories that a criminal gangster, this is with an ER at the end of it, film, that they benefit from dialogue, from the harsh, gritty language that's being spoken. Well, coming out of World War II, we have that gangster film is going to turn particularly dark. It's going to no longer just delve in film good and bad, clearly black and white sorts of moral stories, because it's going to recognize, those stories are going to recognize that indeed gray is probably the color of life, That it is not clear cut, black and white in that, right, true and false, right and wrong. It's not that life is not that clearly divisible in that way. And so these gangster films through the 1940s are going to turn particularly dark in and after World War II. That indeed, one of the most powerful interviews that I've ever watched was a documentary on the Enola Gay, the plane that flew the first bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima. It didn't fly both of them, did it? I don't think so. But Enola Gay was the name of the plane that flew, what was the bomb called? Little Boy? Little Boy? We can look that up. Anyway, when we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, right, the Enola Gay was the plane, I think Little Boy was the bomb that they dropped out. The interview is with the pilot, who is a military guy straight through and through, who just follows orders, right? It's not about morality, it's about orders, right? You're going to fly here at this moment, you're going to drop this, open the bomb bay doors, ticking off exactly how the thing does. Then you're going to turn the plane, bank at a certain, he's following orders, and he's talking about, in this interview, he's talking about following the very, rigid military, and he turns and he says, but I took a moment, they told us not to look, right? They told us not to look at what happens. And I took a moment and just glanced out of the rear view mirror or whatever a plane has, side view mirror to see what had gone on, and he saw the explosion, right? When a nuclear bomb, atomic bomb falls down, it doesn't hit the ground and explode, it explodes just before it hits the ground, and he saw that moment, and he said that was a radical moment of significant change for him, that he realized what he had done, right, at that moment. That is, after World War II, we don't just celebrate, the image we might have in your head of World War II is that still photograph. Is that redundant? Still photograph? That seems redundant. Regardless, that photograph of Times Square with a big party and a marquee that says Japan surrenders, and there's a sailor bending a girl over and kissing her. There's a real famous image of that, right? We think about the party and celebrate and going, yeah, man, look what we did on there, over there, Pacific and Europe and that sort of thing. We rock and all that sort of thing. Failing to recognize what that pilot seemed to recognize was the same science that gave rise to penicillin, maybe the greatest invention humans have, well, it's not the greatest. I guess the wheel is probably the greatest invention we've ever given ourselves. Fire. The Gutenberg press. What was the next one? I said fire. Fire. Okay, arguable whether that's an invention, but certainly taking the natural and then being able to tame it in that way. Certainly, wheel. I'm going to submit wheel, Gutenberg press, right, the ability to make books and copies and that sort of thing, and penicillin. Right? That people who died in the Civil War and every other war previous and World War I would not have died, 80% of them, if we had had penicillin, right, for example, right? So the same science that had given rise to penicillin, which saved so many lives during World War II, is the same science that gave rise to bomb that could kill 300,000 people in an instant and maim multiple generations. Right? And then that glance back, that pilot seems to recognize that science, you can't just celebrate science. It's not clear-cut good in that sense, right? It is gray is often is the preferred color of life. In that moment, film noir arises. That film noir, gangster films turning particularly dark to look that, hey man, life is not clear-cut, good and bad. That criminals and cops cross. If you don't know this, cops are not always on the side of good, right? Right? That often they're, what is that Nicolas Cage? Has anyone seen that Nicolas Cage movie? Where he plays the bad lieutenant? It's not his name, that's not the name. No?
It's new.
Is it not out? Yeah. Isn't it? Not Nicolas Cage. Not Bruce Willis. Is it Bruce Willis? Oh, come on, he plays just a nasty cop. Oh, he was in Harry and Maude, Mallory, Mickey and Mallory, Natural Born Killers. Woody Harrelson. Have you seen that movie? Woody Harrelson plays a bad cop. Rampart. Has anyone seen it? No? Looks like it's supposed to be pretty awesome. Regardless, right, cops are not always only on the side of good, right? That gray is the most interesting color often to examine. So film noir, if we see just in the French title alone, right, noir, dark or black, right? Dark film. films that both aesthetically as well as story-wise are going to turn incredibly dark, right? They're going to be looking at the seedy underside of a corrupt society. It's not just that criminals are corrupt, but the society is corrupt as well. That doesn't mean you and individuals, but that society is very, very corrupt. It's going to be, those films are going to be paying attention to that. We're going to meet in 2 weeks or so the two French dudes who give us the title, give us the phrase film noir, because they're not allowed to see films during World War II, right? Germans occupy France, and Germany, Berlin, is not going to allow American imports into France during the time. So it's not until the liberation of France in 1944, and then it takes a long time for all these American films that have been made during World War II and then immediately following to ever show up on the French screen. So it's by 48 and 1950 that these films are being shown, and these two guys, Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut, two guys we'll meet in a couple of weeks, are going to be 20 years old at the time, and they're going to be watching these movies in movie theaters, and they're going to recognize a particularly downbeat, dark mood and atmosphere of these films. And indeed, the filmmakers may or may not known that they were making in that way, right? That's just the story they were telling, and it took somebody else a little bit later to look at it and go, dude, do you see what you're showing us? This downbeat, cynical mood, and this downbeat, nihilistic attitude, indeed, fatalism. That is, cynicism is like, tomorrow's going to suck. Right? That's one way to think about being cynical or pessimistic. Maybe it's pessimism. Pessimism is tomorrow's going to suck, right? Well, dude, pick it up. Let's have some positive about it. No, it's going to suck. Nihilism is the next, right? So why bother? Tomorrow's going to suck, so why bother? That's a nihilist. Whatever, right? That's a nihilist. Fatalism is the next. There is not going to be a tomorrow. And in the moment after the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the possibility of there not being a tomorrow must have felt much, much more real, right? In that moment when science had given rise to the technology that could have wiped out 300,000 people times 2 when we drop them on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? That the possibility of there not being a tomorrow must have felt much closer, much more significantly visceral, real, physical to us at that time. Pessimism to nihilism to fatalism. That's the gangster film turning particularly dark. There's an awesome movie, Stanley Kubrick's movie is called The Killers. The Killing. Anyone help me out there? It's either The Killers, or The Killing. Whichever it is. His movie of 1955 time period, Stanley Kubrick. So the gangster has gotten away with robbing a horse track, right? He's got millions of dollars, and he's at the airport, and his girlfriend's over there, and he's watching. The cops are closing in, so we're editing back and forth between all of this stuff, and the girl sees that the cops are closing in, and the guys are taking the luggage out to the airplane, and we're watching, and we're standing on the tarmac. Back in the day, you stood outside to wait to get on the airplane and then walked upstairs into it. You've seen Beatles or images of that stuff. And the plane goes, and the suitcase opens up, and the money gets blown all over the place. And Sterling Hayden, the star of the movie, is standing there, and the girlfriend starts going, "The cops are here! You gotta run! You gotta run! Go run!" And you know they're gonna get him. I mean, it's fatalism. It's nihilistic. You know they're going to capture him. And she goes, "You got to run, you got to run." And the film ends with him going, "What's the difference, right, of being arrested and in jail or not, right? What's the difference?" he says. And the film ends on that moment, right? I don't remember that we see him get arrested, but the idea that in life or in freedom or in jail, it's the same thing for him, right? That's really pessimistic to fatalistic in that sense. What's the difference? That's what happens in the film, in film noir. Those French guys coined that term by looking at these movies and recognizing that particularly downbeat mood and atmosphere, cynical look towards humanity, etc. So let's check out two scenes from 2 movies. The first, 1941, is Double Indemnity. So earliest of film noir. We watched the clip, I hope. from Maltese Falcon. Yeah, we did. Which was also 41. Also, earliest film noir, likely film noir. One other point I forgot to make up here. The influence of Germany. Lots of people from Germany, Czechoslovakia, as well as Poland are going to attempt to escape, and all over Europe, attempt to escape becoming tied to fascism through the late 1930s, or all the way through the 1930s. And many of those people come to the United States, most of them come to the United States. Many of the people who are involved in film production at the time then go to Hollywood and they want to make movies for obvious reasons. That's what they did back home. Well, the German folks bring their influence from German Expressionism, most recognizably in film noirs. That, right? We give the word chiaroscuro to the intense uses of light and dark elements within the frame. That when wanting to film a gangster, a criminal, or a shady cop, or a character, we might often put them in high contrast lighting, like this, right? Having me in and out of the shadow at the same time. There's a sharp, more or less, a sharp contrast between the light on my face and the dark elements on my face, to present that mood, that characterization, and that cynical look, influenced directly from the Germans who were making the German Expressionistic. And one of the claims we said is that they use light and dark elements. We give the name that chiaroscuro. It's not just filmic. You do this in painting. Rembrandt van Rijn, back in 1950, yeah. Anyway, back in the 16th century, was painting using high contrast colors, high contrast use of colors in his paintings. Similarly, in film, we do this to get to that characterization. Remember, German Expressionistic films were about mood and psychology and characterization more than they were about a clear-cut story being told. Double Indemnity. Early film noir is generally classified as one of the earliest of film noirs. So let's check out.
Mr. Dickerson.
Who else is there?
My name is Ned, Warner Ned.
If you're selling something.
Look, it's Mr.
I
Dickerson.
gotta introduce you to it. So this is Fred McMurray from My Three Sons, if you're watching Nick at Night, you know. This is Fred McMurray from that. He is an insurance salesman. The movie opens with him walking into his office, and he's holding his shoulder and he's panting a little bit. He's obviously been hurt in some sort of way, and he sits down at his desk and he picks out what we called it at that time, a dictaphone, right, a recording device, and he's gonna make notes verbally, right? And he starts talking into his dictaphone. So the whole movie's going out, and he's gonna address his boss, and he's say, "Hey, Keys," his boss's name. "Hey, Keys, I gotta tell you something, man." And then we're gonna flash back to get us. How did I get to this moment? Sort of movie, right? We've seen hundreds of those things, right? American Beauty comes to mind. How did I end up here, right? So through the voiceover, in a moment, you're gonna hear voiceover. That's him in the future, right, telling us this story that we're watching here. And throughout the movie, we're going to go back to him, right, sitting at his desk, and every time the blood stains a little bit bigger, we realize that he's been shot, and then every time he's sweating a little bit more, he's slouching a little low, he's dying, right, throughout the whole movie. And the movie's going to tell the story of how we got here, and at the very end of the movie, he's going to die. And you know this already. That's downbeat of epic purport.
Magazine subscription.
Listen, Mr. Dickerson is not in.
How soon do you expect it?
If you home and he gets here, if that's any help to you. What is it, Nellie? Who is it? It's for Mr. Dickerson. I'm Mrs. Dickerson. What is it?
How do you do, Mr. Dickerson? I'm Warner Ned, Pacific All Risk.
Pacific All what?
The Pacific All Risk Insurance Company. It's about some renewals on the automobile. I've been trying to contact your husband for the past 2 weeks, but he's never in his office.
Is there anything I can do?
The insurance ran out on the 15th. I'd hate to think of you having a smashed fender or something while you're not fully covered.
Perhaps I know what you mean, Mr. Ned. I've just been taking a sunbath.
No pigeons around, I hope. Now, about those policies, Mr. Dickerson, I'd hate to take up your time, but...
Oh, that's all right. If you wait till I put something on, I'll be right down. Nettie, show Mr. Ned into the living room.
What would the living room be?
In there, but they keep the liquor locked up.
So I'll just carry my own keys. still stuffy from last night's cigars.
That's the voiceover.
The windows were closed and the sunshine coming in through the Venetian blind showed up the dust in the air. On the piano in a couple of fancy frames were Mr. Dietrichson and Lola, his daughter by his first wife. They had a bowl of those little red goldfish on the table behind the big Davenport. But to tell you the truth, Keith, I wasn't a whole lot interested in goldfish right then. On auto renewals or on Mr. Dietrichson and his daughter Lola. I was thinking about that dame upstairs and the way she had looked at me. And I wanted to see her again, close, without that silly staircase between us.
I wasn't long, was I?
Not at all, Mrs. Dietrichson.
Did you check out a couple of things that are already going on here? If this is about a morally corrupt society in the area of Gray, we're going to have it in terms of crime that's going to happen through this movie. These two people are going to, she's going to manipulate him into killing her husband and running off with the insurance money. Double indemnity is a clause, an insurance clause that says if you die an accidental death of some mysterious type, the insurance, they don't have this so far as I know any longer. The insurance company would pay double. So she's going to get this guy to help her kill her husband so they can run off with the money together. Of course, she's going to kill him, so she gets all the money. But we've also got what could be coded in classical Hollywood cinema and through today, the woman's shot. Did you just see it happen? That you start off with a woman's body at her feet and then pan up, tilt up that body to end up showing it, right? That sort of way. You see that we've looked at her legs, then we looked and she's still buttoning her, right? Even in terms of content, film noir is playing with the production code just a little bit about what they can get away with in terms of crime or in terms here of sex. I know it seems really light to you, but to show her from the legs, watching her come down the stairs and then tilt up her body there is playing around with that production.
Well, I've got my face on straight.
Perfect for my money.
Ned is the name, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 F's, like in Philadelphia. You know the story.
What story?
Philadelphia story.
Why don't you sit down and you tell me about the insurance? My husband never tells me anything.
Well, it's on your 2 cars, the LaSalle and the Plymouth. We've been handling this insurance for Mr. Dietrichson for 3 years. We hate to see the policies lapse. It's a honey of an anklet you're wearing, Mr. Dietrichson. As I was saying, we hate to see the policies lapse. Of course, we give him 30 days. That's all we're allowed to give.
I guess he's been too busy down at Long Beach in the oil field.
Couldn't I catch him at home some evening for a few minutes?
I suppose so, but he's never home much before 8.
That's fine with me.
You're not connected with the automobile club, are you?
No, the all rich, Mr. Dietrichson. Why?
Somebody from the automobile club has been trying to get him. Did they have a better rate?
I think your husband's a member.
No, he isn't.
Well, then he'd have to join the club and pay the membership fee to start with. I never knocked the other fellow's merchandise, Mr. Dietrichson. The automobile club's fine. I can do just as well for you, though. I have a very attractive policy here. Wouldn't take me 2 minutes to put it in front of your husband. For instance, we're writing a new kind of 50% retention feature in the collision coverage.
You're a smart insurance man, aren't you, Mr. Neff?
Well, I've been at it 11 years.
Doing pretty well?
It's a living.
You handle just automobile insurance or all kinds?
All kinds. Fire, earthquake, theft, public liability, group insurance, industrial stuff, and so on right down the line.
Accident insurance?
Accident insurance? Sure, Miss Stevens. Wish you tell me what's engraved on that anklet.
Just my name.
As for instance?
Phyllis.
Listen. I think I like that.
But you're not sure.
I have to drive it around the block a couple of times.
Mr. Neff, why don't you drop by tomorrow evening around 8:30? He'll be in then.
Who?
My husband. You were anxious to talk to him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, but I'm sort of getting over the idea, if you know what I mean.
There's a speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Suppose you get down off your motorcycle and give me a ticket.
Suppose I'll have to go for the warning this time.
Suppose it doesn't take.
Suppose I have to whack you over the knuckles.
Suppose I bust out crying and put my head in your shoulder.
Suppose you try putting it on my husband's shoulder.
That tears it. 8:30 tomorrow evening, then.
That's what I suggested.
You be here too?
I guess so, I usually am.
Same chair, same perfume, same anklet?
I wonder if I know what you mean.
I wonder if you wonder.
I wonder if you wonder. Cheers.